Oh, Joey's got his headset on. You know we ain't fooling around now.
The society that we're about to talk about is a society that is free of all the old superstitions, incarceration, prisons, police, cruelty, and law. All laws will disappear, and the professions will disappear that are no longer valid, such as stockbrokers, bankers, advertising, gone forever, because it's no longer relevant.
A little bit more light to my side so I can read easier off of my laptop. It's unplugged. The screen likes to dim. Let's talk about the Venus Project, shall we? I'm traditionally a free market economist, but the more I've read about the Venus Project, the more I've thought about it, and the more I have thought about ways of how we might change our present society into a Venus Project type society, the more I have convinced myself that this might actually hold water. And being a Ron Paul type, this might be very interesting to many of you, at least judging by the comments. When I threatened to rip off my Ron Paul sticker, it seemed to concern a few people, which I guess is understandable, because there are plenty of people out there still who don't know who Ron Paul is, and that is a shame. Regardless of whatever we decide the Venus Project is, Ron Paul still is a good person, and he deserves to be in as many authoritative positions in this government as possible. That's my editorial. Anyway, what I want to talk about, I have a few different ways of going about this, and I was thinking about doing a high production value kind of video, and I apologize for not doing that. I'm not going to do it. It just takes more time than I think it's worth, and I think you all know basically my style when I put a lot of time. I'm going to put more time into the argumentation, more into the ideas than the flair. And so here it goes. First, everyone pointed me towards StephBot's debate with one of the Venus Project types. I don't know if he was apparently in their activist branch, the what do they call it? The Zeitgeist movement, which are the people surrounding the Zeitgeist movies who have now latched on to Fresco's work with the Venus Project, and social cyberneering, I guess, is what Jacques Fresco originally called it. The Venus Project itself is just a live sort of Disneyland of his ideas, where he's actually built these buildings down in Miami, or not in Miami, in Venus, Florida, hence the name. But he lives in Miami and goes to visit and whatever else, and it is quite cool. You can find videos of that kind of stuff. The concern that StephBot has was, how do you run a society and manage resources without price? Well, what was unfortunate is that they never really defined what they meant by price. It seems to me that StephBot assumes that price is simply a variable that comes from supply and demand. That is to say that if the supply of, I don't know, some sort of mineral or some sort of ore, or any kind of resource, really, any kind of resource is low and there's a big demand for it, we have to be real scrupulous in the way that we use it. We have to be very conservative, I should say, very conservative in the way that we use it. And the way that's expressed through a free market society is that it's a very high price and very few people can then afford it. Well, the problem with that is that just at that level, and that's not really the full story, and this is where, unfortunately, the Venus Project guy seemed to have stumbled and sort of ran around in circles. To leave it at that point, is it really... Are we really to be proud of a system that manages its resources by, instead of, you know, taking a rare resource and just giving it to a few people, rather than taking a rare resource and trying to come up with some sort of technological application such that everyone can use it, no matter how limited it might be? It reminds me of a scene from Jack and the Beanstalk, the Disney version, where Mickey Mouse and Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Goofy are all sitting around a table, and they have one bean left, and they're slicing the bean into, you know, pieces of bread. And Isn't that, I mean, the visual there would be the Venus Project, where they have one bean, that's all they have, and they are still sharing it amongst each other. In a free market society, we would just simply pick the richest person to eat the whole bean. Ooh, you know, it probably would be Mickey because he's the, you know, the popular one, and Goofy and Donald would die of emaciation. Well, that would be a different kind of children's story, wouldn't it? So the other side to this, though, is that the variable of price, that is to say, a variable that results from supply and demand, does not necessitate a monetary system. If you were to go into your kitchen right now and try to make pancakes, you will find that you'll have some things and you have maybe, perhaps not, some other things that are necessary to do this. You might have baking powder, flour, eggs, and oil. But you look in your fridge, you have no milk. You have no milk, or you have very little milk. Regardless of what it is, do we just give up at this point? We say, oh, we can't make pancakes. Well, most people do, but the reality is if you know a little bit of science behind it, the whole point of the milk is just simply to thin out the batter and give it a little bit of water content so that the gas can escape and capture into little air bubbles within the egg, and so it makes it all fluffy and whatever else. Knowing that, all you can do is take the little bit of milk that you have, put a little bit more water in there, and if you don't like the taste of water, put a little lemon juice to round off the flavor, and voila, you have a Venus Project pancakes. So this is interesting. We don't need a monetary system to dictate price. Just supply and demand itself, with resources themselves, is enough to give us a variable, and we can call it price, we can call it whatever you want. But in the free market world, it doesn't stop there. If all we're doing is managing resources, it would stop there. But a free market system has to equate profit into the equation. And here's the crazy thing about profit, and then we'll leave the video there and we'll talk more in depth in the next one. If you and I were in a company together and say we make cabinets between the two of us, I hope I'm not puffing into this too much, it's been a while. We make cabinets, right? We would not sit down at one of our very masterfully crafted tables and say, how much would someone pay for this? We wouldn't do it. Not quite like that. We wouldn't say, you know, well, I might throw out, well, we worked real hard and it's a nice table, so say $1,000. You might say that's a bit steep. I don't think the average person would buy that. See, that's where you go wrong. That's where you go wrong. To maximize profit, it's a graph. And actually, here's a graph. To maximize profit, what you have to do is think about the sale over a span of time. Instead of assuming what the average person would pay for a given widget, a given good or service, what you do is make sure that it's solving a problem that is in high demand to solve. If you remember back when memory foam mattresses first came out, they were very expensive, and now they seem to be relatively cheap. Why is that? Is it because nobody buys memory foam? Well, no, they buy foam all the time. What actually happens is we all have the problem, or most people have a problem of getting a good night's sleep. But someone like me can't solve the problem for a ton amount of money because I don't have a ton of money. So what do? To maximize your profits is to jack the price up as soon as it hits the market. As high as you can possibly go. So long as somebody buys it, you're doing fine. As soon as people start passing you up saying, ooh, it's too expensive, and you're not selling anymore, drop the price just slightly, and just slightly, just slightly, just slightly. And you continue that process until finally you put the damn thing on overstock.com, or you ship them all to Walmart and they can sell it for, you know, pennies on the dollar. What's important to realize here is that the production value of those beds, or the production costs of those beds, is going to be the same throughout. However, in doing this profit scheme over a span of time, we maximize profits by getting the maximum amount of profit per unit. Do you see that? If we sold it at the price that the average person could afford, that super rich person would come up, snatch it, for a price much less than what he would be willing to part with. And that's not thinking entrepreneurially. To think money, to think profit, you want to suck out as much money as a person is willing to pay for a good or a service. Don't think about what it ought to be priced or what the average person would buy it at. We'll get to the average person next month, next season, and the poor people will have a Christmas sale, whatever else, and we might even sell it for less than its production costs. But if we sold 100 units at 1,000 times its production costs, it's no big loss. It's really no big deal at that point. And that's how things work. I mean, I go to Bath and Body Works to buy soaps and stuff, and it just amazes me how expensive this shit is, and then all of a sudden it's so cheap. Or you walk into a store like Ross and you see the retail value and then you see the Ross value. But ask yourself this: when was the last time you walked into a retail store and you saw the retail price and underneath the production costs? Oh no, it would never happen. Oh no, it would never happen. You would walk into Bulgari or Gucci or whatever, or Burberry, and look at one of their watches that you can get for $1,500, and you would see underneath a production cost of significantly less. And there it is. So when we talk about supply and demand, we can still talk in terms of price, if you so wish to call it that, without necessarily talking about money, and certainly without talking about profit. And that paves the way to a fresh conversation on the validity, possible validity, of a resource-based economy, and ultimately the Venus Project.